At the risk of an overly productive day, I'm going to make a tape discussing who it might be that has such a vendetta towards me, that they're powerful enough to pull what they've been pulling with me as a dummy. Now, I know from international law that the whole principle of international law is outcasting or shaming. True, there are things that you can't use shaming for. For example, in the war in Iraq, Bush knew no shame. But you would think that when armed men attacked a child blindside who was about 11 years old, that the people would not support them for fear of being shamed. Instead, they send me Ann Mitchellisms. I'll tell you about Ann. She was the daughter of J.P. Morgan's daughter, and she was close with me for a while. They say I'm a coward. She likes studying Soviet workers in Pittsburgh, child molesters, I guess, was one of it. Anyway, we crossed paths at Carnegie Mellon. She sang beautifully. She sang one of my songs. I can still hear her sing it. It's pretty. She was very pretty. New York girl. I wasn't particularly responsible with her. I wrote to her father, and he was mad. She got mad. But it was just a friendly little note. I mean, hi, how you doing, man, type thing. Because I visited them. And even though I've been homeless, I didn't licky chops over a townhouse in New York. I'm not that kind of person. Too spacey to do that kind of thing. So, and I'm faulted for that. People say that's how you got yourself into this, by not being materialistic. But Bush is one. Oh, but there's evidence that he may have blamed my father for the loss of his plane at sea. My father talked to both me and my mother on different occasions about the guilt he harbored and not being quite good enough. When I talked to the Navy about it, they said my father's record was outstanding. But the type of predators that I deal with latch on to something like the gloomy feeling that you wished you were better at what you did in conflict as proof of sin and evil and treason and cowardice and so on. Navy did not share this opinion, nor did they share the opinion that Reagan was responsible for what happened to me. They weren't afraid to discuss it. I mean, they weren't Michael Reagan and Patricia Fripp screaming from the banisters, screaming, tearing their hairs. The children will suffocate under their pillows if we entertain even so much as a rapid eye movement of suspicion that it was Reagan. They just said, no, we don't really buy that. They were not flatulating paranoids trying to whip up hysteria about Reagan being implicated. They were part of the Navy. They were just saying, well, I understand your concern, but it sounds like a common enemy to us or something. It never crossed their minds that the people who attacked and tortured me had anything to do with a plan that involved shooting Reagan and not only me. Common enemy theory, you can kiss it goodbye. They had nothing to do with that because they were too busy campaigning in lampoons on behalf of the actual assassins. And the entire swarms of people who London could call in, the entire swarms of people who Reagan could call in, announced hostilities because on behalf of the people who wrote the letters, because they said that virginity proves rape and has to be avenged by rape. They established this narrative, to use Donald Trump's thing. Now, how did they play that happened? See, to me, behind the scenes, it suggests that they puppeteered the whole thing, that they planned the whole thing. They picked a hapless pedestrian. I mean, the Appalachian Honor System in Pittsburgh is one of the most shining examples of mutual recognition I've ever seen. They approached me on the street in extremity to show sympathy. That's a very rare moment between two people who've worked very hard and gotten some recognition from school. It's not standing up at a podium with a tassel, I admit. Now, I have problems with their call when it comes to what was done to me as a child, and I don't want to be bothered with them. I think that they're confused. I personally think the Department of the Navy is confused. I don't think Yoko Ono is confused. I think she knows that this was a mission of revenge for Hitler's governments in hiding, and she's doing it. This is what her revolution number 9 is. That's my opinion. I could defend that opinion. So Yoko Ono would have a motive, same as Bush, because I was the son of my father. My stepsister, oldest half sister Jane, worked for Gulf, and she despised me because she saw me as the loss of her father and the embodiment. I mean, they made it a point, this little cluster of women, to name my brother, half brother, Adam, which means firstborn. You see, it discounts me. She would have a motive. Jeff Thompson, her dude, was into industrial practices. And he took me to see Deliverance, and he built clubhouses and shacks, and he, you know, loved Japan and stuff. There's a lot of idiosyncrasies to see. What lived in a funeral parlor for a while. So those some suspects of how it could have worked. Donald Trump sort of legerdemains his way into the situation. This is the way that they say it's not puppeteered, it's not puppet strength. And Flip, touring in 1979 on the subject of found art, with a picture of Gail Burstyn on the cover of one of his records, or at least her very close look-alike, it's not anything other than pure coincidence. And they weren't planning to find the script they had planted on me. Okay, they have another explanation. Flip was small is beautiful, and Jimmy getting overly excited about his um, idol. Hitchhiked all the way to St. Louis saying, "Look at me, look at me." And Flip, selling small is beautiful, said, "Tell you what I'll do. I'll tell all my honchos about you, motherfucker." So they start going, "Hey, there's somebody out there who we don't know. Wow, nobody knows who he is. Wow." And Trumpington was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun. It's going to take a giant." And then they find their text, their script about he's going to come. It's very simple. She was the prettiest Eastern girl in the room. He's going to come from Midori. And Penis Gabriel has 2 nose picks on his cream rave ups picture poster from the Lamb tour. He has 2 nose picks on his nose because Moses knows his nose picks. He knows which one you're going to pick. See, it's very simple. That's what he said when he picked out his own wife. She was the prettiest girl in the room, so it was very simple. He didn't need his Cornel West spinner beanie. But Cornel West said, "If you respect me, you'll put on my spinner beanie." He said, "Yes, sir." He put on Cornel's spinner beanie, and Brian Eno blew on it. And it spun like this. And they said, "Let's tell What were they going to tell? That let's tell the people who Jimmy Creary snitched, that he's been snitching them. And they observationed an impacted neuroplasm that they had implanted. They said, let's threaten him with HIV. He's such a coward. They started using skin creatures on me and they escalated to COVID. They justified it because of a Milanese bimbo. And of course, what's her name is from Milan. And you were supposed to hush no talking back when they murder Circe and stuff. They put a white rose, and at the scene of the offending justification, which were people I danced the horror with as a little boy. And they say I'm an anti-Semite. I've never been ashamed to identify myself with the Jewish community. It's a problem for them. So I had outstanding indignation about the Holocaust. Up until the time it was used for a reparations thing that victimized other innocent people. And then I called a moratorium on the strutting of the issue. And they used me for these Holocaust survivor special education modules, and this is the stuff they call provincial norm in the administration of the University of Pittsburgh. It turns out Shulman, the guy who they were depending on for all, Mike McGuff at the Post Gazette was depending on. Back in days when I was reporting that skinheads as shock troops for the white supremacist movement and trying to understand where Adam Eisenstadt, who was working with Shulman, at least one of his friends was working for Shulman, was coming from. He went on to write speeches for Trump. And guys with swastikas, SS buttons would show up at Jim Urban's parties and stuff. Totalitarian sumptuary, Louis Lapham called it. And they're putting this stuff on with the drama club. And that only the devil has sex, and then some bimbo comes out and says, you wanna? It's very Pittsburgh, the administration of education, and Pitt was always getting into trouble for prostitution jobs. So when they say it's a provincial norm to grab a child by the hair and take it out and gas it and beat its brains in, they mean it. That's a provincial norm. Hey, man, no, son, you don't snitch. Wesley Podsvar, he lived in Westmoreland County, who's up there. It's named for the General Westmoreland. I applied to the Army. There was a general who freaked out at me because I didn't pass the hearing exam. Said something snotty. He lives out there with Mel Gibson. I mean, he's the Tenoti from Australia, who I suspect of the great arsons in the West Coast in Australia that came with COVID, the smoke virus. He's the conspiracy buff of Yoko Ono and the Lenin archetype. They decide what's conspiracy and what isn't. What is aluminum? And Mazeroski's out there. He doesn't want to hear Roberto Clemente, who's an issue of this here script there. That kid who attacked you was named Kasparowski. That's too much like the maze of Maz. And he knew Westmoreland County, Podsvar did FEMA for charter for Reagan, and knew my father. So they're just pummeling Queerbait back in the alleys, dragging him through glass, shoving evil things in his face, making comments. Taking him out to Butler to make movies, some guy pouring penis at him. As a child in trauma. I mean, you could see from the pictures, any picture of that time and what a trauma I was in. Ken Crimson insulted the intelligence of every man, woman, and child on earth, claiming that picture was not evidence of trauma after it emerged from years of fighting them in homelessness, subjecting myself to horrible exposure elements. I had the things removed that were precancerous from my face. I was in seizures, screaming, ocular gyrations. I ended up with Parkinson's. And you know, Chubby Checker says they had it right because he was white. You know, I can't speak for Chubby Checkers. I don't know if that's true, but you know, I'd like to think that he would know better. So you think you're special, you know? And that was the whole point. Make sure he doesn't think he's special. He went to La Chica Academy, right? He was alternative high school. He cries when Kristen does and stuff. And they're like, no, son, don't say nothing about anybody in this precinct because everybody in this precinct is solid, united as a wall. We are a walled city when it comes to queerbaiting. So, you know, these people knew all about it, knew I didn't know anything about it. I'm just like Jimmy Curry. They say, are you mellow? And I'd be like, for days, I don't know if I'm mellow. Maybe, you know, one of the girls who was interested in me decided level with somebody like uh, Teddy Rockefeller used to come around from Swarthmore, one of the girls there. He's like, you don't tell me that the kid who's not even mellow had something going for him that a Rockefeller doesn't. So maybe it was Rockefeller who pulled this stuff. There was a McConnell. You know, I saw some out of the corner of my eye after I drew it on his wall. I mean, he was a real smart subconscialist who I met at the governor's school. Had diabetes, as I remember. And Ben Carter, his father, Bruce Carter, did woodcuts. You know what I'm talking about? No, son. He was an Army, you know, with contacts all over Greenville and where not. Industrialist type vet, war vet, you know, prominent. Ellsberg, hey, Danny. Hey, Danny. Hey, Ellsberg, how's it known? How's our big project? Bush is on the line. He wants an update. How's Vince Irene? He's making tapes for us at school. Oliver Stone's got his back. There's probably others. Sharon Henry with Patrick Henry Society. Evan Hours. Oh, I'm in Patrick Henry Society. He's dead, Jim. Mary goes up to Leon Botstein. Leon Botstein, hey, Louis Labin. Hey, Louis Labin. John Schulman says this guy is a feminine loser who pushes himself on other people. He has boundary problems. Louis Labin says, is that so? Is he defying trespassing up in your precinct there, Leon? And they put out this book called by Lewis Hyde. They had a Kevin Hyde up there, right? This Jekyll Island magnate. Lewis Hyde. Lewis laughing. Kevin Hyde. Lewis Hyde. What's he hiding in his hide? Dr. Jekyll. Jekyll Island is his first names club. Ronnie, Donald. And it's about the erotic life of property. Like, where's that? Who's that postcard belong to? It belongs to the collective. Or does it belong to a libertarian who refuses to do what Foucault told him he must? Think it's one of them. Michael Tive, he worked for Sony. He was my neighbor. He was the fat man. I was the little boy, right? Elizabeth Blumenfeld. Gellamini, the Blumenminis. Bloomberg, they got a, you know, T-Mobile and Bloomberg Stadium or something here in Seattle. It's the Dutch Sons for telling about the war index. Who's the wriggling finger of nuclear fate? What are they doing threatening their own children? because it's the Spinner Beanie of Cornell West says they gotta. He's their favorite Muscovite. He has an antenna that comes up out of his head. My favorite Muscovite. Who else could it have been? My father's name appears apparently in 1984, the 1950s movie. He took me a Clint Eastwood film. He took me a Night of the Generals. I've never heard of him cross paths. He crossed paths as an artist who was featured on American Post Snap. I never heard about the movie stars he knew. He knew Eisenhower, Teachers College. They were there together. Who do you know? Who did he cross paths with? He's not here to ask. I'm sure there was somebody. He crossed paths with the Beatles before their big. I'm supposed to know that these people were interested in me. Why would they be interested in me? Everybody has fathers and parents like that, I thought. I mean, Beg Wattenmaker knew the names of every governor in the state when he was 12. He and every governor in every state when he was 12. His father was a psychiatrist for Attica State Prison. That's big. I thought everybody had big parents. Michael Tive introduced me to Governor Milton Schaap. What's special about me? Who could it have been? Burson was just a little girl. She went to Bryn Mawr eventually, right? She was in honors. One of the Israelis. Who could it have been? Who would go maniacal cross-eyed zoomerang at a little boy? I honestly don't know. It's hard to understand. I'm proud that I got a letter from Martha Gellhorn. That shows some pretty good judgment. But Sidney Poitier, know my daddy. He wanted to break the mold of being symbol. Talk about something else other than the civil rights movement. Did Harry Belafonte know my daddy? He and King were really brothers, close, lovely men, genuinely lovely men. Who knew me? That Andrew Peckham kid with his little brothers. His older brothers. Pick on me when I was little, single me out. There was some guy in Marlboro, the cowboy named Strupp, who said he thought I hunched my shoulders. Yeah, Daddy was at 717. He had a Grand Torino. That's just Clint Eastwood. Didn't he take me to Wiggles there, my daddy? Maybe he knew Clint. I don't know. Am I supposed to know? I don't know. He lived around the corner from Sir What? It was the dude who calls up Ted Kennedy and says, I'll support you anyway, bro. Never mind, man. Never mind, up quick, guys. I've got Pune online. I'll have to cut this short. I've got Oliver Stone online. I'll have to cut this short. But don't you worry, Daddy-o. There's a spectrochemical lab hidden behind hedges deep in Homewood with the name Wecht featured prominently there, where they made the spectrochemical, the TC, stuck me with. That they all knew about when they came to live. Oh boy. They had a bimbo from Milan, some girl who I thought really loved me because of my lure. Hitchhiking to St. Louis just to see King Crimson play. Why wouldn't they encourage me? There's no more for no more like you. They mongered. And then they pulled out their Pennsylvania pussy ball disc. And that's one sold her story to Billy Graham. Let's go collect. That's one sold her story to Peter Sinfield. Let's go collect. This one still has one for sale. Get Oliver Stone quick. And they went through this, they took me to underground sex therapy centers to show off their pizzazz. I wasn't into it. I used to throw their fucking drugs away the minute they turned their backs. I hated that shit. Who could it have been? Who was behind the French connection? Take you, tell him one, two, three. George Romero was our neighbor. He seemed like an underground little moonshiner of films. Wouldn't have expected him to be big enough, but he had Stephen King on the line. He might have been big enough. He was bigger than me. He was a big motherfucker when he comes to me. Oh, and they had Jimmy Ryan hiding in his towel closet and saying, I'm Anne Frank, I'm Anne Frank. Who comes up with that stuff? The United States government, evidently. The whole shitbag of it. And of course, they get cahooters with the Russians. All of a sudden went off to nyuk, nyuk, nyuk with Putin about the whole thing. And this is what it means when they talk about the nature of reality. Who's that dude, Lewis Black or something? Doesn't he have any courage? Say something about this stuff, or is he another one? At the open mic, but we don't. You come here, my microphone, queerball.